What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Just Coolins podcast, and I am R.W. Coolins, coming at you this evening. First and foremost, giving honor to God who allows me to come at you in this manner. And I just want to come at you tonight. It's something that's been on my mind, something I think somebody needs to hear out there. And it's just something very simple, something so basic that we understand, but do we really? And it's one of those things we used to say back in the day, and you're going to laugh when I say it, and here it goes. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. You know, when we were kids, we used to say that. We used to say it back to people when they called us something. We used to say it, people used to say it to us when we called them something, because name calling back when we were kids was something that we used to get upset about. We used to get, have a certain feeling about. And the first thing we would do to defend ourselves, to make us feel better, was the sticks and stones thing that I just said. But it comes to the forefront now because, last week sometime we had a congressman call another person, a female, effing bitch. He said he didn't say it. People said they heard it. And as she mentioned, he went on the floor, gave this little half-ass apology, and then she came back and gave a long dissertation. And the one thing that stuck out at me was one of the things that she mentioned was that I'm somebody's daughter, where he mentioned his daughter and his family. So she mentioned that she was someone's daughter as well. But it really made me look, reflect back on some things in the way we would name call and different things like that. And some of the things we look at is when rap music first came out, well, not when it first came out, but as it went on and it grew, there was a big debate about, calling each other the N-word in the music and calling the B-word, calling our women the B-word, and all these different things going on, and what verbiage we were using, how we were using it. All these things were coming into play. But, we're at a point now in our lives where we couldn't stand up and say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names never hurt. We're past that point, because the words that were used when you were younger are not the same words that are being used against you as you become older. The B word, the H word, calling somebody up, it's your hoe or slut, or calling somebody the N word, or all the different names you can think of that are derogatory terms that someone may say towards somebody, that you may have said towards somebody, or you've heard in a rap song or a song talking about somebody to downgrade or diminish the value of an individual. I'm a true proponent that I don't like and don't use the N-word. I refuse to use the N-word to this day. But I'm going to give you a little story on my use of the N-word when I was a younger man, and how it still affects me today when I hear it because of how I used it when I was a young man. And it goes back, I'm probably about 12, 13, somewhere in that age. I mean, a teenager. And in the neighborhood we lived in, as I mentioned before, it was a majority, white neighborhood. And like I said before, I used to go up into the hood, or not, I don't even say the hood, to different areas where a majority of the black folks lived. And I would get called the Oreo, and then I would go back to where we were living. I would get called the N-word and things like that. But on the street we lived on was a cemetery. And the cemetery was situated straight across the street from the park that we used to play. I mean, we did everything in that park. We spent most of our time in that park. But across the street was a cemetery, big wall around the whole thing. And it took up a whole block from 3rd Street all the way over to 4th Street where we lived at. And there was a man, caretaker, which I didn't understand what it was at the time, but he was the caretaker of the cemetery. And at the time, it was a brother, middle-aged gentleman. I'm thinking we were teenagers, so he had to be at least 30s, 40s, somewhere in there. But we would see this man, and we never really knew who he was. All we knew was he was in charge of the cemetery, and anytime balls went over the wall from us playing baseball or anything like that, we had to sometimes jump the wall because the gates were closed, or we went through the gate, ran in, ran out, and everything like that. But we never knew who this man was. Sometimes he would chase us out because we weren't supposed to be in there. But the one thing I do recall about this man, who we did not know, was the name that we called him. And we called him N-word Harry. N-word Harry. And I don't know if his name was Harry. I don't even know where the name came from. I don't know who came up with the name for the man. I don't know anything about that. All I know is we as kids just fell in the routine of calling him N-word Harry. So if we went in there and we got chased by him to get out of the grounds or whatever, that was the name we said. N-word Harry chased us, or is he there? Can we go get the ball? All those things came into play. But looking back on that and, going into this about the name calling and things like that, I reflect back on that now. And one day, I can't remember the year, but I think I was a young man in the military. I hadn't been gone away from home too long. And something hit me one day out of the blue. And I started thinking about this man. Not knowing his name, but what came to me was what we called him. And I'm not going to go through that again, but what we called him. And at that point, something hit me to say, who was he? Who was he, and why did we ever get to the point of calling him what we called him? Because we didn't know him. We had never met him. We never talked to him. We didn't know anything about him. Did he have a family? Did he have kids? Who was he? But he was minimized from being a man to being labeled as an N-word Harry by us as children and the people in the neighborhood who used to be at that park with us. And like I said, as I reflect back on that and I had all those questions at this point in my life, at this time in my life, and it's bothered me for years and years and years to wonder whatever happened to that man. And the reason I always ask whatever happened to that man is because if I ever had the opportunity to apologize to him for what we called him, calling him out his name, all the things that may have been said about him, and not knowing whether he knew that's what we called him or not. But it just eats at me that we as young kids could label someone so freely without knowing who he was, not because of who he was, but because of what he looked like as far as the N-word was concerned. And we as young African-American kids fell right into that realm of calling this man out of his name just because. I think that plays a big part in why I don't use the N-word, why it took a while for me to get used to hearing it in rap music. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I've never called people out of their name. I'm not even going to sit here and lie and say that at some time I haven't called a woman out of her name or a man out of his name or any of those things whatsoever. But listening, as I mentioned that phrase in the beginning, as I looked it up and was looking at some things and it jumped out at me, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. As you look back on that, when we used to say it, those words hurt. Those words still hurt. Because whenever you call someone out of their name, call somebody something differently than who they are, no matter how strong you are, no matter who you are, no matter what you've been through, it stings. It stings. And the reason it stings is because, you hear people say it's not what they call you, it's what you answer to. But whether you answer to it or not, it's still going to sting. We're at a time in society and in life right now that the name calling is flying rampant. I mean, all we have to do is look back over the 8 years of, President Obama and all the names he was called, all the names his wife was called, all the names his kids were called. And a lot hasn't changed. in this time and what we're going through right now. But what I would tell each of you out there listening is next time or anytime you have a disagreement, you have someone you don't see eye to eye with, or you run into somebody who you have called out of their name, you don't have to go into detail about why you're apologizing. You don't have to go into detail what you called them. But get that burden off of you of the fact of you called someone out of their name in your past at some time by just saying, hey, I apologize for anything I may have ever said to make you feel less than who you are. It's that simple. And that's why I say if I was ever to get the opportunity to meet, and I don't know his name, so I'm going to call him Mr. Harry from that cemetery, trust me, I would make it a point to apologize, not only for me, but for everybody that was in that area, in that circle at that time that called that man out of his name. Because the one thing that we should understand and we should know is that people of color have been called out of our names for years and years and years. And for us as people of color to be involved in that and to continue that cycle, we need to really check ourselves and get to the point where, like I've said many times before, when you see that brother or that sister, address them accordingly, not out of their name, but as your brother or your sister. We got work to do, y'all, but it starts with us. We can't keep blaming everything on everybody else until we start working within ourselves. Love yourself, love one another, keep your head up, and most definitely keep your faith in God. I'll see you on the video, and I'll definitely see you on the radio. I'll talk at you. Peace.